is foundational to the thriving of a society. And thriving marriages and marriages that work hard to stay together protect children, and they have long-term benefits to everyone around us. And we need a society that recognizes that marriage is a covenant or a contract that should not be broken on a whim. Marriage has never been understood as a simple contract, but a covenant, a commitment essential for family and societal stability. In common law, many of you know what common law is. It forms the foundation of our legal system. Marriage in common law, at the founding of this nation, was considered the most sacred civil relationship, requiring strong justification for dissolution. And Blackstone, whose legal commentaries are still cited by the U.S. Supreme Court, wrote that marriage is not to be dissolved lightly, but only for grave reasons. But today's divorce culture has made marriage disposable, and the consequences are devastating. There's skyrocketing divorce rates, financial ruin for women, and children are suffering lifelong harm. Senate Bill 228 restores, for those who opt in, the accountability and seriousness of marriage while ensuring that victims of abuse have a clear, just path to safety. If it is the preference of this committee to get this bill passed that I need to strike title, I am willing to do that.
Are you wanting to? Are you asking to strike title at this point?
I'll strike title.
Senator Devers asks unanimous consent to strike title. Without objection, that will be the order. Title is stricken. Debate is closed. The vote will now occur. If you favor Senate Bill 228, you will vote aye. Opposed, the measure, you will vote nay. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Boren. Nay. Senator Brooks. Nay. Senator Yek. Nay. Senator Jett. Aye. Senator Rosino. Nay. Senator Standridge. Aye. Senator Gallagher. Nay. Senator Howard. Nay. 2 ayes, 6 nays.
Having received 2 ayes and 6 nays, I declare Senate Bill 228 to have failed. Senator Devers, you are recognized to explain the provisions of Senate Bill 456.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, thank you for your time again on this bill. You know, we make many important decisions on many consequential issues in this committee and in this building, but there is no issue that any of us will ever address in our entire careers in office that is more important than this issue, than this bill. Children are being murdered. I'll say it again because I know we all have 1,000 things in our minds this time of year, and I don't want anyone to miss the gravity here among everything else that's going on today. Children are being murdered in our state. And because of common reporting, some of you may be aware and under the impression that the work to protect children, preborn children, is just over in Oklahoma. But sadly, it is not. And while the abortion clinics no longer offer or perform abortions, there is a massive loophole in Oklahoma's pro-life laws. Namely, they were written not to apply to the mother herself. This means that Oklahomans can order abortion pills online from out of state or out of the country and legally take them to murder their own preborn sons and daughters right here in Oklahoma. And these are abortion pills. Easily ordered, and you can get them in just a matter of days for free. A friend of mine ordered those pills online from one of these abortion pill websites. And he told them a sob story, and he got them for free. And any Oklahoman legally can do this. Now, some of you may have seen the billboards around the state or the streaming advertisements from these abortion pill distribution networks, and they're taunting us. There's a giant billboard right outside of I-35, and I have a picture of it, but it's south of Goldsby, and you can look up my June 24th 2024 press release if you want to see a picture of one of those. It depicts a hand holding abortion pills, and the text says, "Need to be unpregnant?" with the URL to where these pills can be legally ordered. Children are being murdered. Not only are these companies brazenly advertising their murderous pills around our state, they are reporting their own numbers. As of August 2022, Oklahomans were performing at least an estimated 2,284 of these mail-order abortions annually. Between August 2022 and August 2024, there was a 14.3% national increase in self-managed abortion pill orders, which, if consistent in Oklahoma, would put the latest Oklahoma estimate at 3,274 self-managed abortions via mail-order pills annually. 3,274 children reportedly are being murdered annually in our state. There simply is no solution to this problem outside of doing the right thing. And that right thing is treating preborn children equally under the laws of Oklahoma. Preborn children are just as much human as you and me. And if they are just as human as you and me, they deserve to be protected with the same laws that protect you and me. In the questioning, some of you may have various scenarios in your mind that you're wanting to ask me about, and my answer will be the same essentially for every scenario. The unborn child is a human who deserves the protection of the same laws that protect all of us. Yes, even the baby conceived in rape deserves equal protection. Yes, even the baby with Down syndrome deserves equal protection. And that is what this bill is doing. It gives equal protection under the law. The primary provision of this bill is to repeal the exception for abortion in the homicide codes, such that the same homicide code that protects you and me, and all of us in this room, should protect preborn children if this bill were to pass. Such protection is a mandate of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which states, "No state shall deny to any person the equal protection of the laws." Our homicide codes deny preborn children of equal protection. And then we are not truly in facial compliance with the 14th Amendment, where our government appears to comply with the law on the surface, but it does not fully adhere to its intent or substantive requirements. Essentially, it means complying in appearance, but not in substance or full effect. In Section 5, this bill also provides protections for women who are coerced into abortion to ensure that only the one doing the coercion is prosecuted. It also is important to note that all existing immunities and defenses already in law would apply here, such as mistake of fact or entrapment or coercion. With that, I yield for questions.
That concludes explanation of Senate Bill 456. Will there be questions of the author? Senator Jett, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there are rumors that there may be a ballot initiative coming. Are you at all worried about that in the context of filing this bill?
Thank you, Senator. I had a lot of conversations with folks about that, and it is a very important question. There are, in this session, a handful of ballot reform bills that have been introduced, and such bills would raise the threshold to 60% or to 2/3 of the counties, and I support those efforts. That is the solution if we are worried about ballot initiatives. But letting babies be murdered is not the solution. The difference in Ohio, where a ballot initiative failed, and Florida, where that failed, was where it didn't. Well, the ballot initiative passed in Ohio and it didn't pass in Florida was one of leadership. And Governor DeSantis labored as a father, a voice for the voiceless, to protect the unborn in his state, and the ballot measure failed. And we need that kind of leadership in our state to step up in that event, but I think that's the kind of leadership we need now, today, in this room, in our state, to be a voice for the voiceless. We have to be fathers and mothers as the state to protect these children. And the fear of a pro-abortion ballot measure should not deter us from doing what is right and just before God. Scripture commands us to act in righteousness without delay. Isaiah 1:16 through 17 instructs us to cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression. Friends, abortion is the shedding of innocent blood. In Proverbs 6:16 and 17, any delay of justice for the preborn out of fear of what may happen is to compromise and disobey what God's clear commands are. Some will say, well, if this provokes a pro-abortion, what if us passing this today provokes a pro-abortion ballot measure? But Scripture warns us against using fear as an excuse for inaction. Proverbs 22:13 says, the sluggard says, there's a lion outside, we'll all be killed in the streets. And what that means is that excuses can always be made to avoid doing what is right, but they are often rooted in cowardice rather than in reality. And if we refuse to act justly just because we fear what might happen, we are placing our trust in human calculation instead of the sovereignty of God. We have to remember that you and I and everybody in this building does not stand first before the ballot box, the people, or the courts. We all stand before God first. Romans 14:12 says, so then each of you will give an account of himself to God. Ecclesiastes 12:14 reminds us, God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. And when we cast our votes, when we speak, and when we act, we do so before the throne of God, who will judge us in perfect righteousness. We are not called in this building to govern by pragmatism or fear, but by faith. And this is a verse that many of us have memorized, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understandings. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. God determines the future, friends, and it is our duty to obey him. We must love our preborn neighbors as ourselves and provide them equal protection under the law. And if our state chooses to honor God by abolishing abortion, then we place ourselves in the best position for him to bless us, whether that is through cultural revival and renewal or economic prosperity or his protection. But the fear of opposition should not override our duty to do what is just. Our state will never be in a better position by continuing to tolerate the evil of prenatal homicide to the tune of over 3,200 children per year in the hopes of preventing a future challenge. Instead, we must be courageous. We must act in obedience and leave the results in God's hands. Today and every time this bill is voted on, if we obey him and protect the innocent, we can trust that he will be faithful to bless our state in ways that we may not even anticipate. But if we will not do justice for the preborn, we should not be surprised when we face judgment and answer for what we didn't do to the least of these. Jesus himself declared, as you did it to one of the least of my brothers, you did it to me, making it clear that how we treat the most vulnerable is how we treat him. And if we refuse to establish justice for the preborn out of fear of political consequences, we are refusing to defend Christ in the weakest among us. I'm not most concerned about a ballot initiative. I'm most concerned about how I stand before God and about these children to the tune of over 3,200 that will be killed between this year and the next year. And the next year, if a ballot initiative goes in 2 years, that's 7,400 lives.
Senator Jett, you're recognized for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So why this bill? There's a number of pill trafficking bills that have been introduced. Why this one?
Thank you for your question. The answer is not as long as the previous. These abortion pills are coming in from out of state, and there are activist organizations that are among the United States. And the only in-state actor that these abortions, the only in-state actor in these abortions is subject to Oklahoma law would be the mother herself. And if we're going to say that the mother has a right to have an abortion without penalty, then we are saying that abortion is legal. This is the only bill that adequately answers the problem of self-managed abortion.
Further questions? Senator Yeck, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, clearly, you know this issue inside and out. I've been convinced of that from day one since you got here. In your research, have you run across what is the reason for unwanted pregnancies? Have you looked into that? Is it lack of access to contraceptives? Is it just we don't support adoptions? How would you explain that? Why we have the number of abortions we do, and what are those reasons?
Thank you for the question. There are a lot of studies. There's a lot of research on unwanted pregnancies, and ultimately, our laws shouldn't protect someone who wants to kill a child. And we say that about our born laws, about our laws that protect born children. We need to be consistent. And I think you'll find some of those, the solutions are not, the solution to a life is not to kill a life. The solution to unwanted pregnancies is to protect that life. And whenever you protect that life, then we'll find that there are many people who will want to help with that child. If abortion or prenatal homicide is not an option in our state, then our state will be taught by our law both the value of human life and the value that God places on it, the value that we as a state place on human life. And I think you will see our culture shift at the same time that we see God blessing marriage and lives of children.
Senator Yeck, you're recognized for a follow-up.
And I appreciate your comments. I'm not sure I heard the answer to my question in that, but would you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you agree if there were fewer unwanted pregnancies, there would be fewer abortions?
Thank you for the question. I think there will be fewer abortions, and there will be a culture that is trained properly on how to value human life. And whenever the culture is trained by our laws to value human life, there will certainly be fewer unwanted pregnancies. Now, there is a distinction between someone who doesn't want to be pregnant and someone who kills their child. That's a huge distinction. There are parents who sometimes don't want to have their own children, but it doesn't mean they're going to be led to murder their children. And there's a great difference between having the desire to kill preborn children, and having the desire to, even though I didn't necessarily want to have a child, but I will protect that child. Those are fundamentally different conversations.
Senator Yeck, you're recognized for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are you running legislation to reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies?
This legislation is about reducing the number of murders in our state. That's what it's about. It's about giving equal protection under the law to all lives. And I think that's the highest point that we must make. That if it is illegal to murder anyone, it should be illegal to murder everyone. And that's what the greatest commandment is: love your neighbor as yourself. And for us to love our preborn neighbor, it means to give them the same justice, equal protection under the law that all of us have under current law.
Further questions? Senator Bourne, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you. It's my understanding that these medications have the effect of having a miscarriage. Is that right?
So if you look at these abortion pills, at the top you have misoprostol, and misoprostol kills the child. And then misoprostol, there's 4 here, it expels the child. It causes contractions. That's what abortion pills do.
Further questions? So within the state, United States, where is our state ranked as far as the number of abortions? I know that you cited 3,274 self-managed, but how did you come up with that statistic, or where did that come from?
Thank you for the question. You can find this data on the CDC and the Journal of the American Medical Association that's out of the University of Texas has done reports and research. And then there is a report here that I'm happy to give to anyone that talks about the babies that are unprotected, and it's an analysis of self-induced abortion numbers in states with so-called abortion bans, one of those being Oklahoma. And the numbers per capita, I heard, are ranks us even as high as number 5 in all the states per capita.
You're saying that we're number 5 even against the states that have abortion on demand?
That's abortion on demand is different than self-managed abortion. So abortion on demand would allow for abortion centers, and our state has banned abortion centers, and yet we still have over 3,200 children being killed in our state every year, and the means for that happening is via self-managed abortion through the abortion pill.
But those numbers, the 3,200 number, is based upon prescriptions or other routes rather than actual verification of such abortions. Is that correct?
No, these are verified and then quantified based on the increase. So I do have the studies here, and again, you have to take into account that those are just reported. There are many that are unreported, and it's reported that up to 4,000 women are driving out of state right now. So it could be up to, we could see as many as 7,200 or more children being still murdered that could have been citizens of our state.
So taking that segue of people traveling out of state, women, obviously murder charges would be brought against women. Would that happen for those that travel out of state?
This bill doesn't really address that.
It does not address what?
Was your question related to if a woman has an abortion out of state and then she comes back, would she be found as guilty under a homicide code? Is that your question?
Yes.
You know, that's a good question. It depends on what the courts might do, depending on Commerce Clause and interdiction. This bill principally just addresses what would happen in Oklahoma. So I think the courts would weigh those things.
But in your two prior answers, you had said that was significantly more. 3,200 was the reported number on pills coming in, and you said over 4,000 people going out. So do you not feel that that's something that should be addressed if that's a larger number?
I think the courts would address that.
So if courts do address it, are we going to have women take pregnancy tests before they leave and when they come back?
You mean us force women to have a pregnancy test before they drive out of state?
Yes, if your number of 4,000 or more happen out of state from state residents, it seems like that's a significant number that we should check into each person.
There's nothing in the bill that would require every woman who's driving out of state to have a pregnancy test. I think that's beyond the scope of law, period.
So what we are looking at, though, is looking into every package they receive to make sure that there's not these prescriptions of pills to every pregnant woman.
I think this bill is offering due process to all lives. That is a constitutional right that in our state, the preborn are not afforded, and it's a constitutional right for our country under the 14th Amendment, and the preborn aren't being afforded this due process rights. That just means we start to treat preborn lives as we treat born lives. And if the standing would be already in the homicide code, so the treatment of life, we already recognize what that due process looks for you and me and for born people. And we're saying that if we're going to recognize preborn life as human life and as God does, then they too deserve equal protection and due process under the law.
Senator Bourne, you're recognized for a question.
I'm sure you've thought of this, but I can't think of how you're going to answer it. But if a woman conceives a child out of the United States and we're treating them like they're born, like born people, how do they end up getting constitutional protection if they are conceived in another country?
This law addresses Oklahoma. We're not writing law that's international law or federal law. We're just addressing Oklahoma.
Senator Bourne, you're recognized for a follow-up.
Thank you. So if a child was conceived outside of Oklahoma, you're still you're treating that child as an Oklahoman, even though they were conceived out of Oklahoma. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. I'm having difficulty deciphering really what your aim at is intended here. This law is just pertaining to Oklahoma law. We're not able to write law for the other states, and I don't think that that's what your aim is. It's just recognizing that in Oklahoma we're going to treat preborn life as equal and give them protection, the same protections that you and I deserve.
Senator Bourne for a follow-up.
Thank you. But when the preborn life is in a nation and then they're born into another nation, you have two different constitutional rights at play. And the premise of your argument is that we're going to treat born people the same as unborn people with regard to their rights. So how do you get around that problem where, for example, a baby could be conceived in Russia, or a baby could be conceived in a country that has completely different constitutional rights than the United States? I'm sure you've thought of that when you're trying to equate the two, but we all know that conception and birth happen in different jurisdictions often.
Okay, I think I get what you're saying now. You're saying if a child was conceived in Russia and the mother moved to Oklahoma during the gestation period or while she's carrying the child, and she moves to Oklahoma, and that would be one of the, and she becomes a citizen. She just moves and lives here, and I'm having trouble then deciphering what you're saying. So we have jurisdiction over Oklahoma. We aren't writing jurisdiction beyond Oklahoma. That's the boundaries of what our duties and responsibilities are. They're to the citizens of our state.
Further questions? What shall the committee do? I have a do pass from Senator Jett, second from Senator Standridge. Vice Chair Gallagher, you're recognized for a question.
Senator, I'm just curious about enforcement. So if we don't pregnancy test every woman leaving the state and then pregnancy test as they come back in, or we don't search everybody's mail for pills, how do we prove the case?
Thank you for the question. The difficulty of enforcing laws is no reason to move forward with just law. 52% of homicides go unsolved, and this doesn't mean we just outlaw. We just remove the restrictions on murder from the books. It just means that there is discretion from courts, and that due process must be upheld, but it's not always simple. And the journey to justice is not always a straight line like we would wish it would be. But that's not, I don't believe, justification for not writing just laws. And I don't think any of us have found that just because enforcement is difficult on some law that we shouldn't write just law. Because I think everybody who's running legislation believes that there's good to it, there's justice to it, and we have administrative rules, and they write rules for things. We have court discretion. We have standing precedents for years and years. We have common law. We have Blackstone that help us. We have all these resources at our hands to help us make the best decisions that we can. And again, just not to belabor the point, but I don't think that the difficulty of enforcement of a law is a reason not to move forward with a just law.
Vice Chair Gallagher, you're recognized for a follow-up.
So if we can prove the case, do you know what would be the penalties for the woman on conviction?
The penalties are already defined under the homicide code, and the courts would weigh that out, and the judge, if it was a jury trial, then the judge and jury would work together to determine what the punishment would be.
Vice Chair Gallagher, you're recognized for a follow-up.
So looking at the elements of the criminal code, this falls right into the category of first-degree murder if you take the preparation of ordering the pills and doing all of that. So do you know what the penalties for first-degree murder is?
The penalties for first-degree murder are very strict. They're very severe, and they can range to the life.
Vice Chair Gallagher, you're recognized for a follow-up.
So the penalties by statute for first-degree murder are life without parole, life with parole, or death. Were you aware of that?
Yes, sir. And if abortion is murder, if abortion is prenatal homicide, and I believe it is, that's the question that's before us. Is abortion prenatal homicide, and should it be treated the same as murdering a born person? And the question that coincides with that is, do preborn children deserve equal protection under the law? Do they deserve justice as well? Or should we show partiality to them? Should we be partial towards born people or people up to who are being killed through surgical abortion, and not show the same equal protection to all lives?
Senator, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you just say solution to taking a life is not to kill a life? I thought I heard that. Maybe I got that wrong.
So the Sixth Commandment says you shall not murder. But there in the Sixth Commandment, what is prohibited is the unjust and unlawful taking of your own life or the life of your neighbor. But what is required is that you do everything you can lawfully to protect the life of your own life and the life of a neighbor. And our laws recognize the Sixth Commandment as the basis for our homicide codes, essentially. And the basis there is that if you take a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, Genesis 9, that this is a foundational principle in creation, in common law, in Blackstone, from the foundation of this country, that's through our Constitution, that's everywhere in our law. That, and some of it is different, and there have been changes here and there in various states in our Constitution. But that if you unjustly take a life and you murder, that you should bear the sword against you. That punishment it's a just punishment to take a life. So in that sense, whenever we say the solution for murder is not murder, we're talking about the categorical distinction. The solution for murder is not to murder more people. That's what our current law will actually allow. It allows more bloodshed. The solution to murder is an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, life for life. That would be to give equal protection under the law for these children and treat their homicide as everybody else's homicide.
Vice Chair Gallagher, you recognized for a follow-up.
Senator, just a simple question. We keep mentioning equal protection in the 14th Amendment. Does the state of Oklahoma have the authority to grant equal protection under the law and for the 14th Amendment when the Congress has not done it, nor has the Supreme Court?
Our own Constitution. So we are not in facial compliance with the 14th Amendment. And essentially, throughout our nation, we are in violation of the 14th Amendment. There's only 10. We had that bill already. But in our state, we talk about, in several places, the equal protection of all lives. We talk about giving due process under law to all lives. And the problem is that we are not in compliance with our own Constitution in that. And in our homicide statutes, we have carve-outs for essentially, it's for a mother who would take the life of her own child. And we say she is legally immune. She can buy abortion pills, premeditatedly know exactly what she's doing, look it up online, make the phone call, wait a few days, get them in her mailbox, take them from her mailbox to her house, unpackage them, and ingest the pill. And if there's two different pills, then she has to wait and to take the next 2 or 3 or 4 pills, depending on how the self-managed abortion is going. This is all premeditated action. But our current law has a loophole that says she will not be prosecuted if she takes the life of her own child. We have a protected class of murderer in our state.
Senator Gallagher, you recognized for a follow-up.
Senator, do you know what the punishment was between the foundation of this state from 1907 to when Roe was enacted, what the punishment was in the law for Oklahoma?
Did you say Roe?
I'm saying from 1907 when the state was founded to when Roe went into effect.
I am not certain.
Senator Gallagher, you recognized for a follow-up.
Senator, would you be surprised that it was a misdemeanor in Oklahoma?
I'd have to look into it. If that's what you're saying it is, then that's, I'll take your word for it.
Senator Gallagher, you recognized for a follow-up.
So, talking about equal protection again. So we know that the woman has equal protection, correct?
Currently, the mother has equal protection?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So
Senator Gallagher for a follow-up.
we know that that baby, by the Congress nor the Supreme Court, have they granted equal protection to the unborn, correct?
I missed some of what you said. Did you say the Supreme Court has not granted equal protection to preborn children?
That's correct.
Okay. Yes, I understand they have not yet done it. And whenever Roe versus Wade was overturned by Dobbs, they said that they were going to allow the states to make this decision. I personally think that that was them shirking their duty before God and man to give protection to all the children under their jurisdiction, and they did not do that. And so now we are left with, here in our state, are we going to take up the duty before God and man to protect all lives? And just back towards your previous question, I don't think that mistakes in the past are a reason to make mistakes in the future, that our bad judgment in the past is no precedent or a reason for us to make bad judgment in the future. We should continually seek to grow and improve and really bring ourselves under God and justice for our preborn.
Vice Chair Gallagher, you're recognized for a follow-up.
I was just thinking, so if it was a misdemeanor in 1907 to Roe, and now we're going to make it a capital crime, I was just thinking of the fact that, and there's a Supreme Court case, and it's basically on Oklahoma, back in the 60s, and I'm getting to the equal protection argument, that females could buy 3.2 beer at age 18, but males couldn't buy 3.2 beer until 21. And so the Supreme Court ruled that that was an equal protection issue and overturned that law. So give me an analysis of if an abortion provider is only going to get 5 years, right, by statute, how can we then, under equal protection, give the woman life or death? Do you feel that there's an equal protection issue there?
This bill would give equal protection because the abortion provider would be included under the homicide codes.
Are you saying
Vice
that
Chair Gallagher for
the
follow-up.
abortion provider would be an accessory to murder?
If it depends on the situation, the specific situation. If the woman went into, currently it'd have to be something like a back alley abortion, and an abortion provider did that, then the courts would make a determination on the measure of fault in that situation.
Further questions? Seeing no further question, Senator Bourne, you're recognized for a question.
I just want to clarify the constitutional rights of children. So if a mother from another nation, a non-American, gives birth to a child in Oklahoma, and that child is born and is healthy, is that child protected as a U.S. citizen under the 14th Amendment? Basically, would that child have birthright citizenship by being born in Oklahoma, even though the mother is from another country?
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Oklahoma law addresses conduct committed in Oklahoma, and that's all that we can control.
Senator Bourne, you're recognized for a follow-up.
Thank you. You didn't answer my question, so I'm going to be a little bit more blunt. Your whole analysis is that preborn children should be treated as people under the United States Constitution, and based on, and you were not clear about whether or not it mattered where they were conceived, but if they died as a result of abortion in Oklahoma, then they would be afforded the constitutional rights. And then I just asked you, what about a child that's born in Oklahoma that is live and healthy and is leaving the birthing suite with a non-American mother? And I asked you, is that child afforded constitutional rights? And you dodged the question. So it seems odd to me that it's not easy to say that both would have a constitutional right if we're trying to treat preborn children the same as born children?
Okay. Well, forgive me. I was having trouble really tracking where you were heading with that question. But if the question is about birthright citizenship and immigration status, if we kill an illegal alien in Oklahoma today, it is still murder. And I think that's what would apply to your question, unless I'm misunderstanding. If this law were to pass, if we killed a preborn child from an illegal alien, it would be murder. Their life would be protected like our lives.
Senator Bourne, you're recognized for a follow-up.
Thank you. So you hinge your child's constitutional right based on the status of the mother, is what you're saying. Whatever the legal status of the mother is the constitutional rights of the child. The mother's womb defines what legal rights the child has. Is that correct?
That's incorrect.
Further questions? Seeing no further questions, will there be debate? Senator Jett, you're recognized for debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe this is a very important conversation to have. And it gets to the very fundamental essence of what it is to be human. And the conversation needs to be had because there are consequences to the decisions that we make against human beings. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your courage to hear the bill. I respect that, and I'm grateful that you did. I think the conversation needs to be had. I was happy to make the do pass motion so that we could have this conversation. And I'm grateful to the author and the passion that he has for the unborn and for clearly stating the truth as he sees it. And I know there's a debate right now for the soul of, in this case, Oklahoma. And it gets back to even our previous bill on the Ten Commandments, is the fundamental foundation of right and wrong. One of those 10 commandments was already cited, the sixth commandment is thou shalt not kill. Some other version says thou shalt not murder, but at the end of the day, there's a prohibition from the creator of the universe to take a human life. And his son said, if whatever you do to the least of these, you've done it unto me. And Pilate, recognizing that Christ was innocent, washed his hands and said, let the people decide. But did that really absolve him of the responsibility of the role he played for ending the life of the Son of God? Christ said very clearly, suffer the little children to come unto me. And even Aristotle, one of the foundational intellects of Western culture that predated the advent of Jesus Christ, outlined the different levels of murder. In fact, we still use those to this day, where there is different levels of murder. If you kill someone by accident, if you kill someone on purpose, if you kill someone in passion, was different than if you plotted and killed them methodically, as the vice chairman pointed out, where you're ordering the mechanism by which you end the life of an innocent. And the other element of the Aristotelian analogy of right and wrong of taking the life of a human being was also calculated in the level of innocence that human being had. Because if somebody was kicking in your door to take the life of your children, you had the right of self-defense to defend yourself. And if you take that life, that was not adjudicated against you as if you had done something wrong, but in fact, you'd done something right. But if you were the one kicking in the door and taking a life, that was different. The level of innocence attributed to the victim of the person whose life was snuffed out elevated the level of the crime that was committed. And I'm hard-pressed, besides Jesus Christ himself, to find a more innocent human being than the one in the mother's womb. So you go from Aristotle and you go to the Declaration of Independence, where our founding fathers, inspired by Scripture, citing Scripture, as we demonstrated in the last conversation about the Ten Commandments. The Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator by certain unalienable rights of life. Full stop. Let's ponder life. Because you can't pursue happiness and there's no liberty if your life is snuffed out. This is a fundamental American principle, and these rights didn't come from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was instituted among men to preserve the rights that were given to us from God. There are consequences to the decisions that we make here today. And we will live with those consequences. And fortunately, we have a very merciful God that can forgive us of all of our sins. But this is real. This is palpable. And we get into a discussion about where does life begin? And since the founding fathers cited God Almighty as the arbiter of why we could declare independence from the tyrannical control of King George, and said that our rights came from God, not man, not from government. In fact, we instituted government to preserve these rights. Psalms 139, 13 to 14 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well." This is one of the more modern versions. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart, and I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Isaiah 44:24 says, "This is what the Lord says, your Redeemer, who formed you in the womb. I am the Lord, the maker of all things, who stretches out the heavens and spreads out the earth by myself." Job 31, verse 15. "Did not he who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one from us both within our mothers?" Luke 1, verse 41. "When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb. And Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit." Psalms 127:3, "Children are a heritage from the Lord, offsprings a reward from him." By the way, the word fetus is Latin for offspring. It is a baby. The Supreme Court has gotten it wrong. In fact, I'll go on the record and say, Obergefell, they got it wrong. For 50 years, we lied to the American women. For 50 years, we lied to them and said it was okay because the Supreme Court had adjudicated that it was okay to violate the fundamental tenets of American freedoms, which were endowed by our Creator: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, snuffed out when you kill somebody. And they told American women that it was okay to kill their baby, and some of them because they weren't steeped in Scripture. The Bible says, "Your word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against thee." They didn't know that they were sinning against their own soul and murdering their own baby because they trusted the Supreme Court, who quite frankly got it wrong. You can't take a life of anybody, even if they deserve it, because they're trying to kill you, without it weighing on your immortal soul, because that's how God programmed us. Police officers who've had to kill in the line of duty have what's called post-traumatic stress syndrome. It's not easy to take a human life. I served in the United States military along with some of my colleagues here. Open check to Uncle Sam that we would kill or be killed as needed to preserve the Constitution. It's not easy to take a human life. In fact, in World War II and in Vietnam, a lot of soldiers were shooting above the heads of their enemies because it was so difficult to take the life of even though it was justified. It's hard to do. That's the way God programmed us. Last week, I had a conversation and a dinner with a group that wants to do away with the death sentence here in Oklahoma. And the executioner and the warden said it haunts him, knowing that they're guilty, wondering if they might be innocent, haunts him. You can't take the life of a guilty person without it weighing on your soul. That's how we're programmed. How can we without these mechanisms and telling ourselves the lies that it's okay. It's not. And here's the problem, because the Supreme Court ruling for 50 years lied to the American women that it was okay to do this. And a lot of them made those decisions thinking it was okay because it was legal, and they've lived with that regret because the society sent them a message that something so egregious as ending the life of their baby was okay. And they still regret those decisions to this day. I was born in 1974. 60 million babies, 60 million Americans never breathed or lived in the light of liberty because of these lies. Here's the problem with the legislation that we have in Oklahoma today. It is difficult to say you're responsible for murder, you should be prosecuted for murder. And finding a jury to do that is going to be a very heavy lift. But what is important today, and reason I did the due pass so that we can have this conversation, is to send a very strong message that no matter what the Supreme Court says, no matter what this body says, ending the life of your baby will weigh on your immortal soul for eternity. And yes, you can be forgiven and God can forgive you, but it's not okay. It's not right. It shouldn't be legal, and you should not do it. And here's the real problem. We have what's called unintended consequences, where we make something illegal for adults, but we don't make it illegal for children. And this happens in the drug trade and in the trafficking trade all the time, is that because a 15-year-old will not get prosecuted as an adult, drug dealers will press them into being their mules. And so they concentrate the onus of distributing drugs to young people, knowing that they will get out. And so they end up saddling young people that are under their control into making the decisions of distributing drugs. And so they put them into a life of delinquency. It shifted the burden from the adult to the child by having a bifurcation of how you are adjudicated, whether you're an adult or a child. This is the same thing that's happening with this. The Supreme Court sent a message to mothers that it was okay, even though that's not okay. And by saying that if the doctor kills your baby, we will go after the doctor. If Planned Parenthood, which is a decriable organization, kills your baby, we'll go after them, but not the mother. We're sending a message that it's okay if the mother does it. And mothers out there, listen to me. You're between 16 and childbearing age, and they're saddling you with the guilt that will come with ending the life of your baby. Because I promise you, when you take these pills and the pain subsides, it will rack your soul with guilt. You cannot absolve it, and we cannot liberate you from that. Only your Creator can. So whether this passes in this committee today, a strong message needs to be sent to would-be mothers who have been lied to. This will not be over simply because a billboard is offering you to get unpregnant. It will haunt you for the rest of your life. And it is incumbent upon this legislature, it's incumbent upon a moral society to not make it easy to do the wrong thing. So however you vote today, that's between you and your Creator. But we need to have this conversation because we need to undo the lie that was told 50 years ago, 50 plus. And the ones that we're saying is, while we will go after the doctor, we'll go after the abortionist, we'll go after the different individuals, the mother is now being put into the untenable situation of making her own decision. Even though people satellite are profiting from that decision, she is going to bear wholly the brunt of the impact on her conscience. It is not right, even if it is legal.
Senator Standridge, you're recognized for debate. Sergeant, secure the watching room.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the work of the author and his passion. This bill, I believe, has some room for improvement. But at the end of the day, I think it reflects the sentiment of the many Oklahomans that stand for life, and that's why I'm voting yes today.
Senator Gallagher, you're recognized for debate.
Senator, I'm being honest when I say I do not see Christ in your bill. And I heard the Old Testament loud and clear, an eye for an eye, but I did not see Christ in your bill. You entitled your bill the Abolition of Abortion Act, but it does not abolish abortion. It does not do anything but expose women to a capital offense, punishable by execution. This bill is not in Title 63, dealing with abortion. It is in Title 21, dealing with crimes and punishment. Oklahoma has the strictest abortion law in the United States. The Oklahoma Supreme Court ruled that there is only one constitutional exception for the life of the mother. If in your press releases and in your answers before this committee today, you assert that women are ordering abortion pills online through interstate commerce and administering them to themselves. Additionally, you assert that a separate group of women are traveling out of state to receive an abortion. Why are we not going after companies? Why are we not doing that? Your bill does nothing to eliminate the constitutionally protected exception for life of the mother, nor deal with abortion pills traveling interstate commerce or women traveling interstate. This bill does not address the issues that you said you were trying to address with this bill. The only thing this bill does is expose women to capital punishment. There's a famous quote by President Ronald Reagan that the person who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor. I hate abortion. I think it's a black mark on our history and our country. I am 90% with you, but I do not believe this bill does anything to solve the issues. I believe it is unconstitutional in the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, and it is unconscionable in its means. I disagree with you on the path, not the destination. I cannot go with you down this road of executing women. Thank you.
Further debate? Would just echo what the Vice Chair said. It's not that I oppose where the destination is of this, of not having abortion, not having unwanted children. What I fear through all of this, not the ballot, but I will answer to that. I will answer for where my vote will be, but ultimately we are putting the punishment on women. We're finding the easiest target, the ones that have to bear that burden. What I know is you don't understand. A person cannot understand what someone else is going through until they go through a mile in their shoes. And for most women that have to seek this or feel that they have to seek this option, the burden is already on them, I believe. The burden will stay with them. But do we subject those same women that oftentimes are making the most difficult decision of their life now to a capital offense, to where they are going to be punished by the state? I think that that's a step too far. I think that it is through Jesus' love that we will stop abortions. I think that it is through wanting children. It's through correcting the system that we have so that we don't have one of the worst foster systems in the United States. We need to show our love to everyone that is already here, to those, so that they make a better decision without the threats of their life being taken away, their life forfeited, every practicality of their life forfeited through sentencing of life without possibility of parole. At some point, we may get to the same destination. I think the path that we have before us is not the way to go to it. I encourage a no vote today. Senator Boren, you're recognized for debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for kind of going out of order. We haven't really talked about how abortion can and does save the life and the health of women who are experiencing complications in their pregnancy. Now, I've received a lot of emails from people all over the state that disregard the science and the medicine around it. And that's somewhat ironic because the same people who are disregarding the science and medicine around preserving the life of the mother when her pregnancy is a threat to her, and those women grieve when they've had to miscarry. They grieve when they find out that the child that they had all these hopes and dreams for is so compromised and presents a toxic response to their body. So throughout this conversation, abortion has been referred to as murder consistently throughout. And that's very hurtful to those that need that medical procedure in order so that they can continue being someone's wife, so that they can continue being someone's mother, so that they can continue being someone's sister. And when we equate all abortion as murder, and if we pass laws like this, it jeopardizes medicine and modern medicine for every one of us. Physicians will not want to practice medicine in states that do this kind of laws. The next thing I wanted to say is that the personhood debate of changing personhood from birth to conception will cause all miscarriages to be presumed murders. Currently, that is not what happens. But if we do is what the author is asking us to do, is to say that every unborn child at the moment of conception is just like a born baby, well, if they die because of a miscarriage, then you have to do a homicide investigation. And there are more miscarriages in Oklahoma than there are abortions. And so on top of a woman having to deal with the loss of her child, she is going to have to go through some kind of interrogation. And we all know how that's going to play out. If you've been married for 4 or 5 years and you've been telling everybody in your town and your church has been praying for you to get pregnant, and you get pregnant and you have a miscarriage, then you're probably not going to be presumed to have murdered your child through some kind of medical intervention. But if you're a single woman who gets pregnant at a Christian college, who's on a national merit scholarship, and risks losing that scholarship because that college has exempted itself from Title IX, which happens in Oklahoma, and then that girl has a miscarriage, she is going to be presumed to have been a murderer. Shifting legal personhood back to conception is just a completely unworkable definition. What we have now is legal personhood happens when you're born, or we in Oklahoma, if you die, if you're stillborn, you're issued a death certificate. Now, does that mean that the life that a woman carries prior, just from the moment of conception before she tells anybody or even knows herself, and when she first takes that pregnancy test, does that mean that that life isn't worth anything? No. It is valuable. It is life, but it's not legal personhood. It has significant social, cultural, religious importance. And we're all dedicated to helping that healthy pregnancy be carried to term. And that's what I've done with my legal practice my whole life and my own advocacy. There are 3 kids running around the world right now that I helped a mother in a crisis pregnancy. It was a healthy pregnancy. One was actually not a healthy pregnancy, and she barely hung on. But she hung in there. She ended up getting a scholarship at OU. Whereas if she was at a private Christian college in Oklahoma, she probably would have gotten kicked out. So what I've learned, if you really want to cherish and prevent abortion, to prevent this 3,200 abortions, reduce the crisis in women's lives, work together to do that. And that's what I've done, and that's what I can continue to do. And I can do that without jeopardizing all of medicine for everybody else, without changing the definition of legal personhood, without taking away the moral agency or the dignity of women, and using the same Christian values that we all share in this room, focus on that of eliminating a crisis, because I can tell you there are places in this world, there are states in this United States, and there are nations in this world that do a better job of eliminating crisis in women's lives who are surprised by pregnancy. And that's what I will continue to do, and I wish that you all could, support that bill that I've had running for 6 years, is to protect women from getting kicked out of Christian colleges because they find out that they're pregnant. And I can't get a hearing for that bill. And with that, I'm going to be voting no today.
Further debate. Senator Devers, you recognize to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members. Again, I know that this is not an easy conversation, and I deeply appreciate you being willing to have this discussion in front of the world in a lot of ways, and appreciate the chairman for having the courage to bring this bill to the committee. It is not unlost on this senator, and so I deeply appreciate that. I'd like to just address a couple things. This bill does not criminalize women. There's no woman that's criminalized by this bill. It criminalizes an act. Prenatal homicide is what it would criminalize. And currently, prenatal homicide is not criminalized across the board. There was a statement that said there was no Jesus in this bill, and I would just like to say that Matthew 23:23 says this: "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe dill, mint, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others." This is what we're here today to talk about: justice. Justice for the preborn, mercy, and faithfulness. The same Jesus that was alive and well as eternal God in the Old Testament, alive and well in the New Testament, reiterated many of the promises and the prophecy, and he fulfilled the prophecies, said to those people of his day, the religious leaders, the political leaders, you tithe dill, mint, and cumin, but you should keep your focus on the weightiest matters that are before you. Justice. The weightiest matter in our state right now is that there are 3,200 plus children being murdered under the cover of law, and if we don't do justice today, Jesus Christ will bear witness against us. Now, I know that that's hard to hear, but I'm not here to soothe any conscience whenever we all have to stand before God. I want to help you. I want to be an encouragement to you. Jesus says in Matthew 7:12, "Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets." Whatever you wish, however you wish you would have been treated as a preborn child, and the same justice that you deserve, the same treatment under law that you deserved, that you give it to all the other children. This is to fulfill the law and the prophets. And to say that women should have legal immunity to kill their preborn children is to say that abortion ought to remain legal, that prenatal homicide ought to be legal. To address another issue, if we don't like what the penalties are for homicide, well, we can run a bill to change that. But I believe that preborn children are equal to you and me and should therefore be protected by the same laws as you and me. If you disagree with that, then it calls into question whether you truly believe that preborn children are equal in value to the rest of us. That's just a simple statement of fact. This bill does not apply to miscarriage. There are not murder investigations into every natural death, and there would not be murder investigations if there's reasonable or there would only be murder investigations if there was reasonable suspicion that a murder occurred. And I'll just end with this. The command of God is clear. Most of us say we're Christians and we really take to heart the Scriptures and what it is that we have a relationship to stand before God. And that command is clear. We must not delay in doing justice or make excuses for inaction. Proverbs 24:11 and 12 says, it warns us, rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to slaughter. If you say, behold, we did not know this, does not he who weigh the heart perceive it? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will he not repay man according to his work? We know that there are over 3,200 children being murdered by abortion pill in our state. We know it, and God knows that we know it. And he is the one who keeps watch over our heart and soul. If we compromise justice for the preborn out of political fear, it's to show partiality, and Scripture condemns that partiality. Unequal weights and unequal measures are both alike an abomination to God. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. If we give legal protection to some, but deny it to others based on their stage of development, we are guilty of unjust measures. Further, we must reject the pragmatic argument that withholding justice today could lead to a better outcome in the future. Romans 3:8 says, it condemns the idea of doing evil that good may come, declaring that much reasoning is truly just wicked reasoning. We are not called to calculate outcomes, but to obey. And Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commands. Loving Christ means obeying his commands fully, not when it's politically or convenient. And just lastly, regarding ballot measures or re-election, our own re-election. Ultimately, the question before us is one of faithfulness. Will we trust in human strategy or will we trust God? Our duty is not to secure political outcomes through compromise, but to stand boldly for justice, trusting that God will bring the results he desires, and we will stand before him to give an account. Not before a ballot box ultimately, but before the judgment seat of Christ. So let us be found faithful and not in the fear of man or any other thing, but operating from the fear of the Lord. I urge you to vote yes.
That concludes debate. The vote on Senate Bill 456 will now occur. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Boren. Senator Brooks. Senator Yeck. Senator Jett. Senator Rossino. Senator Standridge. Senator Gallagher. Senator Howard. 2 ayes, 6 nays.
Having received 2 ayes and 6 nays, I declare Senate Bill 456 to have failed. Senator Devers, recognized to explain the provisions of Senate Bill 829.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. Ronald Reagan was a good president, but by his own assessment, no-fault divorce was his greatest mistake. And his son, Michael Reagan, wrote this: